period of about 90 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. I want to be clear, at about or after 90 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, there's a switchover point whereby if you ate before the exercise, you will burn far less fat from the 90-minute point onward than you would if you had gone into the training fasted. So let me repeat that. If it's moderate intensity, so-called zone 2 cardio type exercise, at the 90-minute point, if you happen to have eaten before the exercise within 1 to 3 hours prior to the exercise, then you reduce the amount of fat that you will burn from 90 minutes onward. Whereas if you had fasted prior to the exercise, you hadn't eaten anything for 3 hours or more prior to the exercise, at the 90-minute point, 90 minutes of exercise, you will start to burn more fat than you would had you eaten. Now, 90 minutes of moderate intensity exercise is a lot. So that's a pretty long run. Even if you're running at a pretty slow pace, like a 10 or 12-minute mile, that's a lot of running. That's a lot of swimming. So that's a lot of walking. That's a lot of hiking. So, however, there are people who are going out hiking all day or running all day or walking all day. And if you want to burn more fat per unit time, you want to oxidize more fat, then you would do that fasted. Now, there are also studies that point to the fact that you don't have to wait to 90 minutes in order to get this enhanced fat burning effect. The studies I was able to find and that looked to me like quality peer-reviewed studies with no company bias or no product bias of any kind. These are studies that were largely funded by the federal government in the university context, pointed to the fact that if one does high-intensity training or even the very high-intensity forms of training like sprints or squats or deadlifts or any kind of activity that can't be maintained for more than these, 8 or I would say up to 60 seconds. So a set of lifting weights repeated. If that's done for anywhere from 20 minutes, so weight training or powerlifting or these kinds of things or kettlebell swings, or up to 60 minutes, well, then the switchover point in which you can burn more fat if you go into that fasted comes earlier. And this makes sense because there's nothing holy about the 90-minute point for medium intensity zone 2 cardio. That 90-minute point is the point in which the body shifts over from mainly burning glycogen, basically sugar that comes from muscles or the liver, and realizes this is going on for a while. I'm going to shift over to a storage site fuel that is in reserve, like body fat. This is going to happen for a while, so I'm going to start tapping into body fat stores. Now, fat doesn't have a little brain there. It is innervated by neurons, but it doesn't have thoughts, and you don't actually control this switch with your mind. This is something that has to do with the milieu of various hormones. What has to happen is insulin has to go down far enough. So if you ate before the exercise, you'd have an increase in insulin. If you ate carbohydrates, you'd have a bigger increase in insulin. Fat and proteins indeed will have lower amounts of insulin, and fasting will give you the lowest amount of insulin. Well, then that switchover point is going to come earlier in the exercise. And if you think about it, if you were to do something high intensity for 20, 30, 40 minutes, so maybe lift weights and then get into zone 2 cardio, if you were fasted, the literature says that you're going to burn more body fat per unit time than if you had eaten before or during the exercise. So what does this mean? This means if you want to burn more body fat, if it's in your protocols and have been approved to do this safely, exercise intensely for 20 to 60 minutes. The higher the intensity, obviously, the shorter that bout is going to be, and then move over into zone 2 cardio. And if you do that fasted, or the medium intensity cardio, I should say, and if you do that fasted, then indeed you will burn a higher percentage of body fat. If you need to eat or you like to eat before you train, that also can work. And if you train very intensely, you're likely to shift over to the fat burning pattern more quickly as well. So again, this isn't really an issue of how long you exercise. It's an issue of how intensely you exercise and therefore what fuel source you're drawing from. So hopefully I've made that clear, but basically you need to deplete glycogen or through high intensity exercise and then move to a steady state exercise that will allow you to burn more fat, or you need to perform a medium intensity or low intensity type exercise for a long period of time before you shift over to burning fat. And indeed, it seems that going into all that fasted will facilitate the burning of more fat overall.